بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Continuing in our sessions of religious knowledge, before starting, I'd like to mention a matter that should be known to all of us, or that we should all be reminded of. The gatherings of Islamic knowledge, which are among the many gatherings that take place in the world. Some gatherings are when you meet your friends. Some gatherings are for when somebody gets married. Some gatherings are for when somebody dies. You gather to pay condolences. Some gatherings are for sport, for jest, and some gatherings are for religious knowledge. The gatherings of religious knowledge, we've been told by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they are gatherings in which the angels of mercy come. The angels of mercy, so special angels that Allah has created for this purpose, for the purpose of searching for gatherings in which Allah Ta'ala is being mentioned and in which the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is being mentioned. This is the purpose of those angels, that they look for these gatherings, and when they find them, they lower their wings and they descend down to these gatherings. These are known as the angels of mercy. And when they attend the gatherings of Islamic knowledge, then there is a mercy that can be felt. Especially if a person makes their intention sincerely for the sake of Allah. Like, for example, to tell oneself, to have in the heart, that I'm here for the acceptance of Allah. I'm here not because I've been forced to come or because it's my routine, I go every week, but I'm here, and while I'm here, me being here in this gathering of Islamic knowledge, by being here, I'm worshipping Allah. Some people, they seem to think, because they've not thought about it much, they seem to think that when you pray as-salah, in a sajda and ruku', that's when you're worshipping Allah Ta'ala. Now that's true, but that's not the only worship. When you walk around the Kaaba, you're worshipping Allah. Likewise, when you're sitting in a gathering of religious knowledge, Islamic knowledge, and you make the intention that you're doing this for the sake of Allah, or because the Prophet ordered it, or because the Prophet is pleased by this, or you intend that you want reward in al-akhirah, you have one of these intentions even, then this matter becomes a worship. So sitting there, listening, trying to understand, and wanting to increase your knowledge, this is something that's rewardable. And the angels, they attend these gatherings. And there have been times in the past, in some of the lessons that have been given by some of my teachers, where people feel the blessings, they feel the mercy. You know, in the past, people would bring their children, their very young children, to the gatherings of religious knowledge if, for example, they were ill. If they were ill. Because they knew that the gatherings of religious knowledge contain many blessings. So they would hope that their children would be cured by them bringing them to the gatherings of religious knowledge. And like this, people who had problems, they would come to gatherings of religious knowledge. Even if they couldn't concentrate much on what was being said, they would benefit from the blessings. Where else are the blessings going to descend? Yes, if you're touching the Kaaba, yes, there are blessings there. If you're at the grave of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, there are blessings there. If you're at the grave of a pious person, blessings descend there. Allah created it that way. So where else, and Allahu A'lam, where the graves of the pious people are, where we are currently, but if we want a gathering where the blessings descend, then this type of gathering is that gathering. So one should not prevent themselves from being in such a gathering. The Islamic knowledge, it is blessed, and it is what lifts a person. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din." The one whom Allah eternally willed something good for, Allah made that person, whether man or woman, knowledgeable in the religion of Islam. So this is a good sign for a person if they have this thirst to increase their Islamic knowledge. So today we're going to go through a hadith known as Hadeeth Jibreel. Sayyiduna Umar, the second Khalifa, radiyallahu anhu, he said, بينما نحن عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم. One day, this is in Al-Madinah, so after the migration. He said, one day, when we were gathered with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, إذ طلع علينا رجل. Suddenly, and they weren't expecting this, suddenly a man appeared. At this time they thought it was a man, because it looked like a man. He said, suddenly a man appeared whilst we were gathered with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. At this point in time, they didn't know that it was Jibreel alayhi salam. The angels are neither male nor female, but they might take the form of a handsome male without having the male private part. And they don't take the form of a female. So Jibreel is not male or female. But Jibreel alayhi salam sometimes will take the form of a man, a very handsome looking man. Sometimes he would take the form of a companion, Dihya. This was a companion, an actual man, a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who was very, very handsome. And sometimes people would see this companion, Dihya, in one place, and that was actually him. And then they'd see him in another, what seems to look like him, in another place. Jibreel alayhi salam used to take his form sometimes and come to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. On this occasion, however, Jibreel alayhi salam came in the form of a man that nobody knew. So Sayyiduna Umar radiyallahu anhu said, إذ طلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب. What he thought was a man suddenly came as though out of nowhere. And he said he had extremely white clothing. Extremely white clothing. And the scholars said that later on we will learn that he asked certain questions. They said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ilbasu min thiyabikum al-bid." Wear white clothing. Meaning this is the best type of clothing, the best color of clothing, whether for a man or a woman. Even if it's a piece of clothing, like let's say a person wears all black, but then they wear white socks. So even that, if a person intends by that I'm following that recommendation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would get reward. even if their undergarment was white. Then if they make this intention, I'm following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by wearing white, then they get reward for it, because that deed then becomes a worship. They're actually worshipping Allah by listening to what the Prophet said sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the past, so when the companions would sit with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would sit on the floor with him. And when someone new would come, sometimes they wouldn't be able to tell which one was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They've just come in, they can see about 60 men, okay, some of them sitting next to each other and so on, and they look similar. They're Arab men, they have beards, so there was nothing that would differentiate immediately the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So some of the companions, they said, Ya Rasulullah, why don't we make you something by which you can be differentiated, so people will know that you are the messenger of Allah. And by that also, when somebody comes in and they've never seen you before and they want to ask a question, they want to ask the most knowledgeable person, so then they can come straight to you. So they said that we want to make something for you. He said that's fine. So they made a slightly elevated platform for him, so that he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would sit with his companions, he would sit on this slightly raised platform, so that whoever comes in and they knew, they would know who to address. So they did that. In other narrations, so we've gone with the white clothing, right? This individual had white clothing on, and it was extremely white, Sayyidina Umar said. In another narration, it says, كَانَ مِنْ أَحْسَنِ النَّاسِ وَجْهًا. This individual, he had a beautiful face. Because many companions narrated this. So one of the companions said, this individual, yeah, I was there on that day. This individual he was handsome. He had a beautiful face. And his clothes were really clean. Really clean. Like sparkly white. You know, like they say if you use certain detergents and they gives you that. Yeah? So they were really, really white. As though there was no dirt, not even a speck of dust on them at all. This is why the scholars say that a student of knowledge, he should try to wear clean clothing if this is available to him. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "An-nadhafatu min al-iman." Cleanliness. This, if it's done for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, then it is something that is really good. It's part of al-iman. It's part of being a Muslim, being clean. So, if one fears that, they're a bit sweaty and so on, then they can shower. They can go and take a bath. They can follow the advice of the Prophet ﷺ and want to be this person who other people are not repelled by. Sometimes a person might not realize their own body odor. So they take care of themselves. And this is something that is Islamic, to take care of oneself. One should make sure that they're not applying to their body things that contain alcohol, for example, because that's not pure. Even if it smells, as some people might be attracted to that smell, even if it smells nice, it is not pure. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ said, "An-nadhafatu min al-iman." So, some of the companions also said that his smell, the fragrance that was coming from this man, who's almost popped out of nowhere. His clothing is extremely white. He's very handsome. And he smells very nice. Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu continued. He said, "Shadidi sawadi sha'r." His hair was jet black, extremely black. You couldn't find a white hair in there. He said it was extremely black, which tells us that Jibreel alayhi salam came in the form of a young man. A young man. And he's going to ask certain questions. He's going to ask the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam certain questions. The scholar said this, it encourages us to learn the religious knowledge, the Islamic knowledge, when we're young. Because people usually who get older, sometimes even in their 20s, sometimes in their 30s, in their 40s, the hairs start to fall out. The hairs start to go white. Unless, Allahu A'lam, someone's living a very, very stress-free lifestyle, then we want to see you at the end, inshallah. This person is usually at this age, the white hairs are showing, and so on and so on. So the Prophet ﷺ, rather Jibreel, he came in the form of a man that had extremely black hair. This tells us that one of us should be encouraged to learn the religious knowledge when we're young, and also then not prevent our children from that. Many parents nowadays, unfortunately, they almost destroy the potential that their children have to learn the Islamic knowledge, to excel in the Islamic knowledge, to be those people in the future from whom Islamic knowledge will be learned. People who are pious, people who are of good understanding, people who are sensible. Some parents destroy this potential within their children by steering their children another way. Something that the Islamic communities are in extreme and dire need of today is more youngsters being directed towards learning the Islamic knowledge. In the past, there would have been a scholar at every, let's say, at every 50 miles or 40 miles, there would be a scholar at every 40 miles. And when we say scholar here, what we mean is an actual scholar. An actual scholar, of which there are very few nowadays. So one should direct the attention of the young to acquire the Islamic knowledge. And that's what Jibreel alayhi salam, coming in this form, this youngster, strongly indicates. So then, Sayyiduna Umar radiyallahu anhu, he said, لا يرى عليه أثر السفر. So they're trying to work out who this person is. Firstly, he's come suddenly. Secondly, his clothes are extremely white, so that stands out. Thirdly, his hair is extremely black. Then the fourth thing is that he said that, okay, we couldn't see any trace on this person's clothing, his face, his hair. We couldn't find any trace of this person being a traveler. Because we'd think that, maybe he's come from another town, another city. But at the same time, we couldn't see any trace of this person being a traveler. وَلَا يَعْرِفُهُ مِنَّا أَحَدٌ. But at the same time, nobody knew him. So if somebody came into the gathering right now, and let's say everybody knew everybody. Somebody came into the gathering right now, and we all looked at this person. This person is either someone who we know, let's say, someone walked in, we either know them or we don't. If we don't know them, especially if we were living 1,000 years ago, where transport isn't as quick, we'd think, look, he's a traveler. He's probably settled in with somebody. Someone's taken this traveler in. So either he's a traveler or he's not a traveler, and we'd know him. But imagine a person now who comes in and he's not a traveler. His clothes are not creased, because in the past when people used to travel on horseback or on camel or on a mule, they travel for days and days. Can you imagine under the scorching Arabian sun? So their clothes would be creased, their lips would be dry, their hair would be everywhere. But Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu said, لا يرى عليه أثر السفر. Not even a trace of him being a traveler. But his hair is nicely combed. His clothes are white. They're not dirty. They're not even creased. His smell is nice. But nobody knows him. So it's as though he's literally just popped out of nowhere. So this, and all the companions were watching this. Some of them then narrated what happened. They said, we were trying to, can you imagine people whispering, you know who that is? Who's that? Is he staying with you? Is he staying with us and such? Is he? So they're all talking. They're all trying to find out who this person is. Then, to add to that, this person, or Jibreel alayhi salam, he stood at a distance. So imagine that all the companions are there, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is at a distance. And so, it was the case that in the gatherings of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, can you imagine, when angels descend, right, in gatherings of religious knowledge, there are blessings. What if the Prophet is there? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So all of the companions were there, and they are, just by being there, they are benefiting from the blessings that are descending. They're listening, questions are being asked and answered, and the Prophet is advising, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And these people are making a difference now. They are working towards the hereafter. Somebody comes in, and usually the case would be, if someone has a question, they go straight to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Somebody who was guarding him perhaps would ask, do you have a question? What do you need? He might say, I just want to give salam, and so on, like this. So this person, and also note, at this time, the people, they weren't allowed to say to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Muhammad, to his face. This was mentioned in the Quran. Allah revealed not to call Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to his face by his name. Instead, say Ya Rasulullah, or say Ya Nabi Allah. Right? So then, these companions, they see this one in the form of a man. He's come, extremely white clothing, extremely black hair. His fragrance is nice. He's not a traveler, but still nobody knows him. He stands at a distance and he says, Ya Muhammad. Oh Muhammad. He said, Adnu. Can I come closer? So all of the companions, can you imagine them turning this way? And then looking at the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, turning this way? Okay. Did he just say, Ya Muhammad? Because they weren't allowed to say it to the Prophet to his face, alayhi salatu wasalam, in terms of respect. So that in terms of honoring him, he has the highest status in the creation. So he said, Ya Muhammad, Adnu, O Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, should I come forward? So they look to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, what's going to happen? So he said, Udnu, come forward. So he stepped forward. And he didn't reach the Prophet yet, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then he stopped again. So the companions expected that, okay, he said come forward. They're in astonishment, what's happening? We don't know what's happening. So he stepped forward and he stopped. Can you imagine one of the companions trying to follow him with their eyes, thinking that we're going to start here, we're going to follow him with our eyes until he gets to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. What happens? An interruption. They're watching and he walks and he stops. And he says again, Ya Muhammad, Adnu, O Muhammad, alayka salatu wassalam, should I come forward? So the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam said, Udnu, come. So he started to walk forward and then he stopped a few times like this again. But the companions, it's like they're in a different world now. They're just like, who is this? Where with, like Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, almost day and night was with Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Sayyiduna Umar also. Sayyiduna Uthman, Sayyiduna Ali, and so on. Radiyallahu anhum. So now, again, he says, Ya Muhammad, adnu, should I come forward? And he says, udnu. Then Sayyiduna Umar radiyallahu anhu said that he came forward and he didn't stand in front of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He came and he sat down in front of him. And remember, they don't know who he is. And they've lived their lives with Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Sayyidina Umar said, this person sat down and he connected them with the knees of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That shows that this one is really close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Really close. Connecting both your knees while sitting down, connecting your knees to the knees of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu said, then he leaned forward. And the Prophet didn't do anything, alayhi salatu wasalam. He's humble, he stayed as he was. Then this one moved forward and put his hands on the thigh of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This one on this one, and this hand on this thigh. And he stepped and he moved forward like this, very close to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the companions, subhanallah, they think, this is something. This is really something. And remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he ever saw something that was haram, he would call it out. And this is what we are obligated to do. If ever there is something haram that we know about, then we are obligated to stop it in a way that it doesn't make it worse. We have to say something or do something. So when this, according to Sayyidina Umar, when this person said, Ya Muhammad, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say anything. So they knew that the Prophet does not stay quiet when something haram happens. But why is it that here the Prophet didn't say anything? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Then he approached and he connected his knees to the knees of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Then he put his hands, this is Jibreel alayhi salam in the form of a man, put his hands on the thighs of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and moved forward like this. And all the while the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam did not say anything. This is also teaching the companions when they find out who it is later on. This is teaching them that when you ask an Islamic question or when you are seeking Islamic knowledge, then the one that is asking and the one that is being asked needs to give their full attention. They need to give their full attention so that they do not misunderstand. Sometimes misunderstanding, it can be very dangerous for a person if they misunderstand something of Islamic knowledge. So Sayyiduna Jibreel alayhi salam, in the form of this man, he asked Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or rather he requested from him. He said, Ya Muhammad, now to his face, he said, Ya Muhammad, akhbirni anil Islam. Tell me about al-Islam. Like to say, what is al-Islam? So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, look how humble he is. He didn't say, of course he wouldn't say this. But imagine someone came and did that to you. You don't know them. Okay? They came and sat in front of you. They put their hands on your thighs. Can you imagine what someone was? Look, first of all, go back. Go back a bit. Right? You're in my personal space here. Go back a bit. Okay? And how do you know me? Can you imagine? How do you know me? Who told you my name? And so on. And what do you want? And look, I don't know you, don't put your hand on my thigh. The Prophet ﷺ said, when he asked, when Jibreel ﷺ requested, he said, أخبرني عن الإسلام, tell me about Islam. He said, Al-Islam an tashhada an la ilaha illallah. Al-Islam is to bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is the Shahada. Or Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. That to bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This means that if a person was a non-Muslim, then the only way for them to embrace al-Islam is by uttering something that gives this meaning, that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If someone was to be asked, how do you enter al-Islam? Then it's not by merely a woman who is a non-Muslim putting on a hijab. She doesn't become a Muslim by that. It's not by a person who is a non-Muslim and he has Muslim friends and he sees them praying, so he thinks, you know what, I'll stand with them and I'll do the actions. Like, I want this to be a new experience. And he does that. He performs the shape of the prayer. By that, he doesn't embrace al-Islam. Just going to a meat shop and requesting halal meat and then eating it, this is not how a person is judged as a Muslim. Rather, the way that a person is judged as a Muslim, if they were a non-Muslim, is for them to say this statement. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The word ashhadu, it's not a condition. So if someone wants to embrace al-Islam, and they said just that, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, they would embrace al-Islam. If someone was to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, so with Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, they would also embrace al-Islam. Likewise, in English, if they were to say, no one deserves to be worshipped except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. If they say that, then they would embrace al-Islam. So al-Islam, it can be embraced. One can enter al-Islam by uttering the two shahadas in any language. This is an important matter because sometimes what happens is that a person might not be able to say Muhammad properly because they're not used to it. It might not be in their language or they've just never said it properly. They might say Muhammad. Now this is not the name of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah did not send a prophet called Muhammad. And likewise, Muhammad with a ha, Muhammad. Allah did not send any prophet called Muhammad. So if a person is saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, then they're not actually bearing witness that Muhammad, who was born in Mecca, whose father's name was Abdullah, who was an Arab, they're not actually bearing witness that he is the messenger of Allah. So the name Muhammad needs to be said properly. But that doesn't mean now, well, if you can't say Muhammad, you can't be a Muslim. That's not what it means. The scholars mention different things that a person can say. One example is that you know that the Prophet ﷺ had at least one son. His first son, what was his name? His first son? Sorry? The first son was Al-Qasim. Yeah, you mean the last one, Ibrahim. Al-Qasim was his first son. So the Prophet ﷺ became known as Abul Qasim, the father of Al-Qasim. He was known. They'd say, where is Abul Qasim? Meaning Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. So the scholar said that if a person they can't bring themselves to say Muhammad, like it just won't come out, they say Muhammad, because ha is quite specific. So if they feel that they cannot say it right now, then how do they embrace al-Islam? They can use this title of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say that he is the messenger of Allah. So they can say Abul Qasim, but then there might be people that can't say Abul Qasim, they can't say Qaf. They might not be able to say Qaf, they might say Ka. They might say Abul Qasim, but he was not Abul Qasim, he was Abul Qasim. So the scholar said, well, this person then, what he needs to do, what he can do is say Abul Qasim, like with a G, Ga, Abul Qasim. Because some of the Arabs, they do that. The Qaf, they change it, they articulate it with a Ga. So they'll say Qasim. Or if you think of any other Arabic word with a qaf, they'll say it they'll say as ga. So a person can embrace al-Islam right from the very beginning by saying La ilaha illallah Abul Qasim Rasulullah. So embracing al-Islam is easy. Embracing al-Islam is easy. But it's by uttering the meaning of these two statements. So if someone wants to embrace al-Islam, this is what one would tell them to do. Now, and it's very easy now, what I'm going to tell you. If someone comes to you to embrace al-Islam, okay, and they say, I want to embrace al-Islam. Now, what you shouldn't do is delay them. How might a person delay? What do I mean by that? Like for a person to say, I'm a bit busy right now. Come back in 20 minutes. No, that would be delaying someone embracing al-Islam. Or for a person to say, you know what? Come with me. This is not something you do. You don't say, come with me, let me take you to my neighbor. Like, he's Islamic, he knows these things. Come with me. Let me take you to the Imam. Or let me go with you to the masjid. No. As soon as a person says to you, I want to embrace al-Islam, you say to them, say, no one deserves to be worshipped except God, and Abul Qasim, who is Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, is the messenger of God. So they'll say, no one deserves to be worshipped except God. Or that there is no God but God, and Abul Qasim is the messenger of God. And they've embraced al-Islam. Easy. Delaying a person from embracing al-Islam is very, 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 very dangerous. Al-Hafiz al-Nawawi and other scholars, they gave an example. They said that imagine Yawm al-Jumu'ah, on the Jumu'ah day, when the Imam is standing on the mimbar and he's giving his address, his sermon. If somebody came in to the masjid and said, Ya Imam, oh Imam, I want to embrace al-Islam. How do I embrace al-Islam? They said that here, if this Imam person says to the one who's coming to embrace al-Islam, if he says to him, wait until after the khutbah, wait until after I'm done, the one that said that, he becomes a non-Muslim. Why? Because they said that it's as though he's saying, it's okay for you to be upon kufr for a little longer until I finish. Because the Muslim, he would love for everybody to be a Muslim. And a person who is a Muslim does not want kufr, which is to be a disbeliever, for anybody. And one would want to relieve a person of being on that state as quickly as possible. So the scholars said that this person, like, you know, the Imam, he doesn't usually talk specifically to you when he's giving the khutbah. It's a general thing. إِنِّي أُوصِيكُمْ بِتَقْوَى اللَّهِ فِي السِّرِّ وَالْعَلَنِ وَإِلَى آخِرِهِ. So he's not talking to you. But they said here, if a person comes and he says, "Oh Imam, oh you standing on the thing," he might not know what it is, the mimbar. "Oh you standing on the thing, I want to embrace Islam. Tell me how to embrace Islam." The scholars said that here the Imam, he cuts the khutbah and he says to him, "Say, no one deserves to be worshipped except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God." So, if a person comes to embrace al-Islam, you don't tell them to wait. You don't tell them, "Come, let me take you to somebody else." No, because it's easy. You say, and you get them to say it. And you don't tell them, as some people sometimes might do, "You need to go take a bath first, because you might be like in this state, so go take a bath first." No, that's delaying the person. Or for a person to say, "Oh, you want to embrace Islam, huh? Oh, okay. Are you sure? Like, look, have you been forced? Have you thought about it? Because it's going to change your life, You can't eat that pork anymore. You can't drink the alcohol. Have you thought about it really well?" This is not what a person does. Immediately, if a person comes and says, "I want to embrace al-Islam," you say, "No one deserves to be worshipped except God," or "No one is God except God, and Abu al-Qasim is the messenger of God." They might ask you, "Who's Abu al-Qasim?" You say, "Oh, it's Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam." It's another name for our Prophet alayhi salatu wa salam. It's because of ignorance on the part of some people, because they never learned, or because they read books, or they just heard from some people, that they ended up committing kufr. I was told by someone who was in a gathering once that a person came like this in the masjid to an imam and said to him, "I want to embrace al-Islam." Or he told someone that they want to embrace al-Islam. Now what was apparent is that this person hadn't embraced Islam yet. This was a non-Muslim, a British-born white male, entered the masjid and wanted to embrace al-Islam. They said to him, "Look, we're having a bit of a function right now. Right? The imam's reciting something, he's giving a bit of a speech. Sit down." When they could have easily told him, "Just say this and this." Then they said, "Yeah, we've also got, there's somebody in attendance today who wants to embrace al-Islam, and there's someone in attendance who's just had a daughter or a son, and we want to name this person. So let's go around and let's pick some names. So what do you think is a good name for a girl? What do you think is a good name for a girl?" They even asked the non-Muslim, while he's still a non-Muslim, "Get him to embrace Islam. What are you doing? Why are you delaying him?" They even asked him, and even he gave an opinion. Even he said, "Yeah, this." Then after all of that, they went and they got him to embrace al-Islam. They apparently delayed him so much. Anybody who delays another person from embracing al-Islam, this person themselves commits kufr. It's very dangerous. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu anhu said, and all other scholars agreed, he said, "Ar-rida bil-kufri kufr." Ar-rida, meaning accepting kufr, it is kufr. And this is the example they gave. Like if someone comes to embrace al-Islam and someone says, "No, wait." They said it's like saying, "Look, I'm accepting of you to be in the state that you are. Just be on that state for a little longer." So the religious knowledge is very, very important. Sometimes you see It's very unfortunate. Sometimes you see people who've not embraced al-Islam yet, and someone in the gathering will say, I want to embrace al-Islam. So, oh, really, really? Yeah, come to the front. They'll bring them to the front and say, what's your name? How old are you? Where are you from? Have you been forced? And so on. And, kind of ask them for their life story. And also, what's giving you this inclination? What's your incentive to embrace Islam? What is it? To make the crowd happy, like, you Muslims are beautiful and you're well-mannered, and, the adhan, it changed my heart. And, the Quran, I heard the brother reciting, and you got beards, and, the women are covered, and, I really love... Get him to say the Shahada. So all the while, what is he doing? He's delaying him. And things like this, they happen a lot. So we need to be aware, because this person is currently on kufr. Immediately, like for example, if someone walked into the gathering now and they said, does anybody know how to embrace al-Islam? I want to embrace al-Islam. Immediately, I'd cut off the lesson immediately. I'd say from here, I'd say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Immediately. If someone came in right now and they stand in the middle and they whispered to one of you and said, I like this. How do I embrace Islam? Right? You would immediately say, you wouldn't say in yourself, the lesson's going on. I can't whisper. No, you would immediately say to them, say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. See, this is the benefit of Islamic knowledge. It protects a person, it keeps a person safe. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked, Ya Muhammad, akhbirni an al-Islam, tell me about al-Islam. He said, al-Islam an tashhad. Al-Islam, it means to bear witness, to actually articulate, if one was a non-Muslim, to articulate, pronounce that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, and believing in Allah, the attributes of Allah and so on. وَأَنْ تَشْهَدَ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ alayhi salatu wassalam, and to believe that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Insha'Allah, this hadith will continue it next week, also insha'Allah, mentioning the amazement and the astonishment of the companions. But I'd like to finish with a different hadith, which is going to act as a reminder, insha'Allah, to all of us. At-Tirmidhi mentioned, this hafiz of hadith. He said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Badiru bil a'mal. Rush to do the good deeds. Rush to do the deeds of righteousness. As though there's no other time to do them except now. Rush to do them. Don't waste time. Then he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, هل تنتظرون إلا فقرا منسيا. You should be rushing to do the good deeds. Why are you delaying them? He said, هل تنتظرون, like intidhar, are you waiting to become poor? Because then if you become poor, then it's going to make you forget about the good deeds. Imagine someone who is poor, and what they're worried about is how are they going to make ends meet for today, not for the rest of the month, for today. Where am I going to find a bit of work to do? Where can I get 20 pounds so I can feed this person and that person, or pay the rent, or pay the bills, and. The only thing they're thinking about is their poverty. It completely submerges a person. It completely overwhelms a person. A person becomes submerged within poverty. Makes them forget about doing the good deeds. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, if you're okay now, if you have your basic needs, food, water, shelter, then don't neglect doing the good deeds, because what if tomorrow you are poverty-stricken? Suddenly it comes upon you. Easily, you'll forget about doing the good deeds. Some people, they neglect even the obligations. They neglect the prayers. So he said, هَلْ تَنْتَظِرُونَ إِلَّا فَقْرًا مُنْسِيًا. Imagine living in a country where if a person was poor, then they wouldn't receive aid from the government. Imagine that. So imagine someone was homeless. What are they thinking about? What am I going to put my head on today to sleep on? Is it going to be, it's not going to be a pillow. Is it going to be a brick? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? They're going to be thinking about food. Where's my next meal coming? I've got to provide for my wife. So they're going to be on this quest, on this search, desperately. They're not going to be thinking about good deeds. They're not going to be thinking about how to acquire more good deeds. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, هَلْ تَنْتَظِرُونَ إِلَّا فَقْرًا مُنْسِيًا. A faqr, a poverty that makes you forget. It wipes your mind clean. أَوْ مَرَضًا مُفْسِدًا. Or are you waiting for an illness to strike you? When this illness comes and strikes you, you're not going to be thinking about the good deeds. You're going to be too concerned with that pain in your shoulder that you've been afflicted with, or that pain in your leg, or your back, or what you've just been diagnosed with. You're going to be worried about, how much time do I have left? The husband will be thinking about, what am I leaving behind for my wife and my children? If his parents are alive, he will think, how is my mother going to recover after I pass? What is my father going to feel? Or, as well as this, a person will be rushing for treatment over here and over here and over here. And if the Western medicine doesn't work, then a person will go, as they say, to the ends of the earth. They heard about this doctor who heals in this way. The Greek medicine and the Chinese medicine and the Indian medicine and the Arabian medicine. A person will be too busy. And then they will say, look, we've tried everything. This person will forget about doing the good deeds. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, while you are not poor, you're okay. And while you're not ill, sometimes, as you get into your, let's say your 30s or your later 30s, you start getting aches and pains, and your recovery becomes a lot slower. So you think from here it's downhill. Subhanallah. Even if a person isn't ill, then there are things that prevent them, that their own body, their own agility or lack of, their own stamina or lack of, it starts to go. So a person starts to think, I need to get healthier, I need to eat better, things start concerning them. Imagine a road, a clean path, and there's your door, you got to get to it. Yeah, but in the way, what is it? There are bills. There is, how am I going to feed this person? There's this illness, there's this pain in my knee. There is such and such that is going on. All these distractions. If you're okay now, to a certain extent, then you should concern yourselves with, we should concern ourselves with doing the good deeds. He said, alayhi salatu wassalam, هَلْ تَنْتَظِرُونَ إِلَّا فَقْرًا مُنْسِيًا أو مرضا مفسدا أو هرما مفندا. الهرم المفند is old age. Are you waiting for old age and then you're going to start doing the good deeds? When a person gets old, sometimes a person in their 40s or 50s, they might look at a youngster of 2 or 3 years old just bouncing up and down, jumping, bouncing up and down. Okay, they're bouncing up and down, they hit the wall, they went down, they got straight back up. What is this? A person thinks, subhanallah, I wish I could be young. A person's in debt. A person has enemies. A person has all these things going on with their relationship, with their in-laws, with their nieces, nephews, siblings. A person thinks, oh, I wish I could be young again. Like some of the people in the past said when they were thinking about the Day of Judgment, they said, subhanallah, if only I could have been a stone. A stone is not judged. If I could be a stone, or if I could be like the dust, that would not be judged. So this person, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, said, هَلْ تَنْتَظِرُونَ هَرَمًا مُفَنِّدًا. This old age, it disqualifies you from so many things. It disqualifies you from so many activities. Praying the nafil prayer, walking to the masjid, walking to religious knowledge where you would get reward for each step. Then you would look at the younger people and say, I wish they knew what I know. I wish. I can't go back in time. It's impossible. I wish that I had known that this is what it's like when I get older, and that I won't be able to do forget about that, I can't do that. You get older, there are things that you realize, I've been eating that for 20 years, I can't eat it anymore. I can't eat it anymore. Now it's causing me problems. My stomach, liver, kidneys. I wish I had known this when I was younger. He said, alayhi salatu wassalam, هَلْ تَنْتَظِرُونَ إِلَّا فَقْرًا مُنْسِيًا أَوْ مَرَضًا مُفْسِدًا أَوْ هَرَمًا مُفَنِّدًا أَوْ مَوْتًا مُجْهِزًا. Are you waiting for sudden death? He said. Because death comes quickly. Death comes suddenly. One of us might warm up a meal and not be the one that eats it. One of us might unlock the car but die before entering it. One of us might see the price come up for the shopping, and one reaches for their card, but one would not swipe it before they die. Al-mawtu ya'ti faj'atan. Death comes suddenly. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, are you waiting for sudden death? Like, this is an unrealistic thing to wait for, because when it comes, that's it. So if a person thinks to themselves that, I've got time. Like the devil whispers to a person. The devil whispers to the 40-year-old, you're only 40 years old. People live to 50. The devil whispers to the 50-year-old, you're 50 years old, your cousin, he is 60 and he is as fit as a fiddle. He still goes for a 2-mile run in the morning. Hey, you got time. He tells the 60-year-old, don't you know your grandma's nephew? He's 90. You've got time. He tells the one that is sitting in a wheelchair at 110, don't you know that some people live to 140? This is what the devil says. He says, you've got time. The devil, he fills people with these hopes. But as some of the scholars said, al-mawtu ya'ti faj'atan. Death comes suddenly. وَالْقَبْرُ صُنْدُوقُ الْعَمَلِ. And your grave, it is the place where the amal, the deeds are stored. So, as the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, بَادِرُوا بِالْأَعْمَالِ. Do the good deeds. Rush to do them. As though you're in a rush. Because you don't know when that clock is going to stop ticking. You don't know when the angel of death is just round the corner. So he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, don't make excuses. Are you waiting for a poverty to strike you that'll make you forget about the good deeds? Are you waiting to become so ill that you'll forget about doing the good deeds? Are you waiting for old age where you'll be unable to do many of the good deeds that you would have wished to have done before Are you waiting for sudden death? Then you'll be dead. There'll be no going back. What are you waiting for? He said, oh, with Dajjal, like some people might have in their mind. Some people might have this idea of, when things get serious, I'm going to buckle down. And I'm going to be on the straight and narrow. Ala al-jadda, as it is. I'm going to be on the straight and narrow, and I'm going to be, everything's going to be fine. Because I'm in a good mental state, even though I'm doing things that are wrong here and there. But when the serious thing happens, you watch. When Isa alayhi salam comes, you watch. When a Dajjal comes, you watch. No, don't do that. When a Dajjal comes, the Dajjal, he is a charlatan. And what guarantee does one of us have that we will be safe? So the Prophet said that, alayhi salatu wassalam. He said, أَوِ الدَّجَّالِ فَالشَّرُّ غَائِبٍ يُنْتَظَرُ. That's like one of the worst things you could wait for. To have this idea, when the Dajjal comes, or when something really serious happens, like for example, if someone says, you know what, I need to change me, right? I need for a big event to happen. Like I need for this great push, like if my mum dies. If my mum dies, then really that will be a life-changing event. Or if my dad dies, then that will be a life-changing event. What guarantee do you have that your mum's going to die before you? What guarantee do you have that your father's going to die before you for you to have this encouragement or this incentive now, this drive to do the good deeds? You could die before them. So that's not an excuse that a person uses to say, well, I'm waiting for that big thing, where I can turn a leaf. No, a person does it now. A person starts changing now. They start doing the good deeds now. They start learning and implementing now. What happens? A person finds it difficult at first. But then, like anything, you get used to it. You get used to it. Have you not seen those people in some countries? They walk on fire, on burning coals. Do you think it was like that on the first day? No. I mean, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't harm themselves. But they did it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, until now, it's like a walk in the park, except it's walking on coals. Right? A person gets accustomed to that. A person gets accustomed to attending gatherings of religious knowledge, making notes, implementing. If not now, then when? So the Prophet ﷺ said, أَوِ السَّاعَةِ. Are you waiting for the Day of Judgment? Because that's ridiculous. For a person to say, and that's not realistic at all, of course. But it's like, to that extent, to that exaggerative extent, like, are you waiting for the Day of Judgment? Because once a person is dead, then consider that's it. Their deeds have stopped. Unless someone makes dua for them and so on. Their deeds have stopped. Their account is frozen now. What they have taken with them to the grave, that's what they will now see on the Day of Judgment. Except, like I said, if someone makes dua for them, recites Quran for them, sends them reward. So a person needs to pay attention to this for themselves and for their children. Imagine one of us dies without having taught our child that, son, when I die, I want you every single day, wherever you are, I want you to recite after my death Al-Fatiha for me. Ask Allah and learn Al-Fatiha properly. Don't say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, because that's not correct. It's Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Oh son, learn how to recite. You know what? I'm going to put you somewhere or with people who are going to help you recite it properly. You're my investment. You're my contingency plan. If I die before you and my deeds stop, I want you to recite Al-Fatiha for me every single day and say, Ya Allah, send the likeness of this reward to my father. So even when I'm in my grave, I'll be getting reward. You're my investment. And I'm going to teach you properly. This is what each and every one of us should do. We should be preparing for ourselves. We should be preparing our children who would, after we die, make dua for us. make dua for us and recite for us. Every time they recite Quran, they say, Ya Allah, send this reward to my mother. Every day. When they attend the gathering of religious knowledge, for attending they got reward. They intended for the sake of Allah. After the gathering finishes, they would make dua, for example. Even if they didn't raise their hands, they would whisper, they would say, Ya Allah, grant the reward that I received to my deceased mother. Grant the reward that I received for this, attending this religious gathering, to my deceased father, or my brother, or my sister, or my son, or my grandmother, grandfather, and so on. Or even if someone says to all of the Muslims, grant them some of this reward. This is a good thing. But a person has to set that up. Like employment doesn't just fall down from the sky, does it? You've got to set it up. Like that, you've got to set these things up. You've got to learn how to do it, and you've got to teach your children how to do it. They are your investment in that sense. So one does not delay doing the good deeds. One sets it up now. If you say, okay, I'll teach them in a week's time. I'll fix that in a week's time. It might be too late. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us all the ability to keep acquiring Islamic knowledge and that we are able to implement it. Let us recite Al-Fatiha for the sake of Allah, and then at the end, inshallah, everyone can make dua. What you would say is, you would say, Ya Allah, and you can whisper it, Ya Allah, send the reward that I received for reciting to, and you can send it to someone who has passed away amongst the Muslims in your family. Okay? So we recite Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين